Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom surrounded by deep forests and rolling green hills, there lived a kind and gentle king. He had an only daughter, a princess so beautiful and pure that the sun seemed to shine brighter whenever she stepped into the royal garden. Her golden hair glistened like threads of sunlight, and her voice was as soft as a morning breeze. Though she was greatly loved by her father, the time came when she was to leave home and be given in marriage to a distant prince. The princess was both nervous and excited, for she had never traveled beyond the borders of her homeland. Yet she was obedient and brave, and she prepared for the long journey with great care. The queen, her wise and loving mother, packed many treasures for her daughter: jewels, golden goblets, fine gowns, and precious keepsakes that would remind the princess of home. But above all, the queen gave her a small white handkerchief, embroidered with 3 drops of her own blood. "Take this, dearest child," said the queen softly, pressing the handkerchief into her daughter's hand. "As long as you keep it safe, no harm shall ever befall you." The princess tucked it carefully into her bosom, knowing it was her most precious gift. She mounted her snow-white horse, Falada, a noble and faithful steed who could understand the words of men. By her side rode a waiting maid, chosen to accompany her and serve her on the long journey to her new kingdom. At first, all was well. The sun shone gently over the fields, and the princess sang songs to cheer her heart. But as they journeyed farther and farther, the maid began to grow proud and cruel. She grew weary of serving her mistress and thought to herself, "Why should I ride behind like a servant? Why should she have the treasures, the horse, and the prince, while I have nothing? If only I could take her place." So it happened one hot day when the princess asked her maid to fetch her some water from a nearby stream. The waiting maid refused. "If you want water," she said sharply, "then dismount your horse and drink for yourself. I am not your servant here." The princess, weary and thirsty, bent down to the stream and drank with her hands. Though her heart was troubled, she said nothing, for she was meek and gentle by nature. 3 times she asked her maid for help, and 3 times she was refused. Slowly, the princess began to see the waiting maid's true heart. When the sun set and the moon rose over the dark road, the waiting maid's wickedness grew stronger. She threatened the princess and forced her to swear that she would never tell a soul of what had happened on the journey. Out of fear and sorrow, the princess promised. But in her heart, she prayed that her mother's handkerchief and her loyal horse, Falada, might yet keep her safe. And so, beneath the silver light of the moon, the path of betrayal was set. The journey pressed on, and each day the waiting maid grew more insolent, while the true princess became more sorrowful. Falada, the faithful horse, noticed all that transpired, for he was wise beyond other creatures. Often he would turn his great dark eyes upon the princess, as if to comfort her, and neigh softly when she wept. At last, when they had traveled far from her father's kingdom, the waiting maid revealed her wicked plan. She ordered the princess to exchange clothes with her. The noble garments of the princess, embroidered with silver and gold, were taken from her, and the maid dressed herself in them. In turn, the princess was forced to put on the plain garments of a servant girl. "You will ride behind me," declared the false maiden proudly, "and when we reach the prince's castle, you shall say nothing, or you will pay dearly for it. From this moment, I am the princess, and you are nothing but my maid." Tears welled in the princess's eyes, yet she remembered the oath she had been forced to swear. She dared not speak the truth, for fear of her life. Silently, she mounted Falada once more, though the horse's heart grieved to see his mistress treated so cruelly. The handkerchief with her mother's blood still rested close to her heart, but when the maid noticed it peeking from her bodice, she snatched it away. "Even this shall be mine," she cried. With a flick of her hand, she threw it into the rushing stream they had just passed. The little cloth floated away, and with it, the last magical safeguard the princess had. At this, her heart sank lower than ever before. Yet still she bore her sorrow with patience, for she was gentle and meek. In this disguise, they entered the kingdom of the young prince. The prince, who had long awaited his bride, came out to meet them with joy. He beheld the richly dressed false princess and thought her to be the maiden Cho, sent for him. Yet, though she was fair to look upon, there was something in her manner that was proud and haughty, unlike the gentle bride he had imagined. Still, he welcomed her with honor and led her into the castle. The true princess, dressed as a servant, was left behind. She was given no place of honor, nor even a chamber of her own, but was told she must earn her bread as best she could. When the king of that land, the prince's father, saw the strange maiden who lingered in servant's garb, he was puzzled. She had a noble air about her, even though she wore poor clothes. Her golden hair shone like sunlight, and her eyes were filled with quiet sorrow. Yet he said nothing, and the matter was left aside for a time. As for Falada, the noble horse, the false princess feared that he might betray her with his speech, for she knew he was wise. So she plotted secretly to rid herself of him. Thus, the true princess's last comfort was soon to be taken from her. The days in the prince's castle passed in sorrow for the true princess. Once she had been cherished as the daughter of a king, but now she was treated no better than a serving girl. Her soft hands, once adorned with rings, grew rough with labor. Her noble heart bore its grief in silence, for she dared not speak of the waiting maid's treachery. The false princess, proud in her new station, walked through the halls with her head held high. Yet she was uneasy, for she feared Falada, the talking horse, might reveal the truth. So she went to the prince and said, "That horse displeases me. He is stubborn and ill-tempered. I beg you, have him killed at once, for I cannot abide him." The young prince was surprised, for Falada was a splendid beast, swift and noble. Yet because he wished to please his bride, he agreed. He commanded that the horse be put to death. When the true princess heard this, her sorrow was deeper than ever. Falada had been her faithful friend, the only creature who had known her secret. She went to the man who was ordered to slay the horse and begged him with tears, "Do not let Falada's head be thrown away, but nail it beneath the great archway where I pass each morning, so that I may still look upon him." The man pitied her and granted her request, and so, when Falada was slain, his head was fastened beneath the dark gateway where the geese were driven out each day. The princess was now set to tend the geese of the castle. Each morning she passed beneath the archway, and there, above her, hung the head of her faithful steed, and each time she whispered her sorrow to him. "Alas, Falada, hanging there," she said softly, and the horse's head, though dead, would answer, "Alas, young queen, how ill you fare. If this your mother knew, her heart would surely break in two." Thus she poured out her grief in secret, and only the silent stones of the castle heard her cries. Now among the servants of the castle was a young boy named Conrad, whose duty it was to help drive the geese to pasture. Each morning he walked beside the princess, though he knew her only as a humble goose girl. Yet he marveled at her beauty, for even in plain garments she shone with a grace that no servant could hide. One day, as they came to the meadow, Conrad saw the princess unbind her golden hair. It fell about her shoulders in a shower of sunlight, brighter than the finest crown. He longed to pluck a strand of it, for never had he seen such beauty. But the princess, perceiving his wish, spoke words of enchantment taught her in childhood. "Blow, wind, blow! Take Conrad's hat away! Let him chase it while I comb my hair today." At once the wind rose and carried away Conrad's cap, tumbling it over hill and hedge. While he ran after it, the princess combed her hair in peace, the golden strands gleaming like purest treasure. But Conrad's heart was restless, and soon he grew impatient with her magic. Day after day the princess tended the geese with Conrad, and each morning she passed beneath the archway where Falada's head still hung. "Alas, Falada, hanging there," she would whisper sadly. And the horse's head would reply in its deep, mournful voice, "Alas, young queen, how ill you fare. If this your mother knew, her heart would surely break in two." Conrad often overheard these strange words, but he dared not ask their meaning. His curiosity only grew stronger when he saw the princess unbind her golden hair. Each time she let down her shining locks, he would try to seize a strand. Yet always the princess called upon the wind, "Blow, wind, blow! Take Conrad's hat away. Let him chase it while I comb my hair today." The wind obeyed, tumbling his cap far across the meadow, and Conrad was forced to run after it while she combed her hair in peace. At length Conrad grew weary of being tricked. One evening he went to the old king and complained, "Your Majesty, I cannot tend the geese with that girl any longer. Strange things happen each day. When we pass beneath the dark arch, the horse's head speaks to her, and in the meadow, when she combs her golden hair, she calls upon the wind, and it blows away my cap, so I cannot touch even a single strand." The old king listened with great wonder. He was wise and shrewd, and though he asked no questions then, he determined to discover the truth. The next morning he rose before dawn and hid himself behind the great archway. Soon the Goose Girl came, and as always she whispered, "Alas, Falada, hanging there." And the horse's head replied, "Alas, young queen, how ill you fare. If this your mother knew, her heart would surely break in two." The king's heart stirred within him, for he saw that this was no ordinary maid. Later he followed them secretly to the meadow and hid among the trees. There he saw the Princess Unbi, in her golden hair, brighter than any crown. He heard her speak to the wind and watched Conrad's cap fly away. When he returned to the castle, the old king was troubled. "This maiden is no common goose girl," he thought. "Some great secret lies hidden in her sorrow." That evening he sent for her, but the princess was too fearful to speak, bound by the oath she had sworn to the false maiden. She could not reveal the truth to any living soul. The old king pondered long, and at last he said kindly, "If you will not tell your secret to me, then confide it to the iron stove in my chamber. You may whisper your heart to its hollow belly, and no one will hear." So it was that the princess crept to the iron stove, knelt before it, and poured out her sorrow. She told how she had been betrayed by her waiting maid, how Falada had been slain, how she was forced to tend geese while another sat in her rightful place. What she did not know was that the old king stood outside the stove, listening to every word. When the old king had heard all, his heart burned with anger against the false maiden. But he spoke no word of what he knew. Instead, he laid his plans in silence, determined that justice should be done. The very next day he sent for his son, the young prince, and asked him gently, "What think you of your bride?" The prince hesitated. "She is fair to look upon, father, yet there is something in her manner that troubles me. She is proud, and her words are often sharp. I had imagined my bride would be gentle and kind, but she is not as I hoped." The king nodded gravely, for his suspicions were confirmed. Still he told the prince nothing, but sent him away. Then he ordered a great feast to be prepared, a wedding celebration more splendid than any that land had seen before. Nobles and princes, lords and ladies were summoned from far and wide to attend. When the day of the feast arrived, the hall glittered with light and music. At the high table sat the false bride, clothed in rich garments, her head adorned with jewels. Yet for all her finery, she could not hide her restless pride. At her side sat the young prince, noble and handsome, though his heart was troubled. Among the servants was the true princess, dressed in plain garb, her face pale but radiant with quiet dignity. She moved through the hall unnoticed by most, though the old king's eyes never left her. At last, when the feast was well under way, the king rose and addressed the company. "Hear me, all who are gathered. I would put a question to my bride. Tell me, my child, what punishment should be given to one who has deceived her master, stolen another's place, and betrayed the innocent?" The false maiden, thinking this was but an idle riddle, lifted her head proudly and said, "Such a one deserves no mercy. She should be stripped of her station, placed in a barrel studded with sharp nails, and dragged by horses through the streets until she perishes." The old king's eyes flashed, but his voice remained calm. "You have judged yourself," he said sternly. Then, turning to the astonished guests, he declared the truth of all that had happened. the treachery of the waiting maid, the sorrow of the true princess, the death of faithful Falada. A murmur of amazement filled the hall. All eyes turned to the Goose Girl, who now stood revealed as the rightful bride. Her golden hair shone like sunlight, and her noble bearing left no doubt that she was the true daughter of a king. The false maiden grew pale as death, for she knew her doom was sealed. Guards seized her and carried out the very punishment she had named, and so she perished in her own wickedness. As for the true princess, she was lifted up with joy. The young prince, his heart full of wonder and love, knelt before her and begged her forgiveness. And thus, at last, she was restored to her rightful place. The hall rang with cheers as the true princess was seated beside the prince at the high table. The old king, smiling with satisfaction, raised his cup and declared, "Let all know that this maiden is the true bride, and that from this day forth she shall be honored as queen." The feast continued with greater joy than before. Musicians played merry tunes, and dancers filled the hall. The princess, who had borne sorrow with patience, now sat radiant beside her betrothed. Yet though her heart was full, she did not forget the trials she had endured. The prince gazed upon her with wonder. "You are more than I ever dreamed," he said softly. "Your gentleness, your patience, your nobility, these are greater treasures than jewels or crowns." The princess, with quiet grace, replied, "It was sorrow that taught me patience, and faith that kept me steadfast. May we rule with kindness, as my mother taught me." Thus the young couple was bound not only by promise, but by love grown from trial and truth. The days that followed were filled with joy. The people of the kingdom rejoiced, for they saw in their new queen a spirit of gentleness and strength. She walked among them not with pride, but with kindness, and her golden hair was a symbol of light and blessing upon the land. The old king, satisfied that justice had been done, blessed the union of his son and the maiden. The prince's heart, once troubled by doubt, was now filled with peace. Yet the princess did not forget her faithful horse, Falada. She often passed beneath the archway where his head had hung, and wept for him. In honor of his loyalty, she had his head taken down and buried with reverence in the royal garden, beneath a tree where birds sang sweetly. There flowers bloomed all year round, as if nature itself wished to honor his memory. Conrad, the goose boy, too, was not forgotten. The queen rewarded him with kins. For though he had once complained, his truthfulness had helped reveal her plight. He was given a place of honor among the servants, and his heart was content. And so the story of the Goose Girl came to its happy close. From sorrow came joy, from treachery came justice, and from patience came a crown. Long did the prince and princess rule their kingdom in peace. The memory of their trials made them gentle rulers, for they had known hardship and betrayal. And the people loved them dearly, for their reign was marked by kindness and truth. Thus the tale teaches us this, that though falsehood may seem to triumph for a time, truth shall always rise again, brighter than gold, and those who endure sorrow with patience shall find joy in the end. And so ends the tale of the Goose Girl. After the feast had ended, and the false maiden had met her fate, peace returned to the castle. Yet the true princess, though restored to her rightful place, carried within her a tender sorrow. The memory of her trials lingered, and she often walked alone in the royal gardens to quiet her heart. There, beneath the ancient trees, she would reflect on all that had happened. She remembered the kindness of her mother, the treachery of the waiting maid, the loyalty of Falada, and the gentle wisdom of the old king. Each memory shaped her heart, making her both gentle and strong. The prince, seeing her often deep in thought, asked her one day, "Why do you wander here in silence, beloved? The court rejoices, the people sing your praises, and yet you look upon the flowers with tearful eyes." The princess smiled faintly. "I am happy, truly, but my heart cannot forget the hardships I endured. Sorrow once tasted never wholly leaves us, yet it makes joy more precious. I think of Falada, who gave me comfort when all else was lost, and I wish I could honor him more fittingly." The prince pondered her words and replied, "Then let us honor him with a monument. In the garden where his head rests, we shall raise a stone carved with his likeness. All who see it will remember his loyalty, and his story will live on as a lesson to our children." The princess's eyes brightened, and she embraced her husband with gratitude. Thus, a monument was built in the garden, a white stone carved with the image of a noble horse crowned with flowers each spring. The people came to see it and told their children the tale of the faithful steed, so that Falada's loyalty was never forgotten. Meanwhile, the kingdom prospered. The young queen walked among her people, listening to their troubles and giving wise counsel. She visited the poor, comforted the sick, and made sure no one was forgotten, her GE. Idleness touched all hearts, and soon she was loved not only for her beauty, but for her kindness. Yet the queen still thought often of her mother, the wise queen in her distant homeland. She longed to send word of her safety, for her mother surely believed her lost. The old king, her father-in-law, encouraged her to write, and so messengers were sent across the forests and mountains to carry the news. When the letter reached her parents, there was great rejoicing. The old queen wept tears of joy upon hearing that her daughter had been restored, and the king declared days of feasting in her honor. Though the journey was long, they vowed that one day they would visit their daughter's new home. Thus, though sorrow had once clouded her path, the princess now lived in peace, her heart growing stronger with each passing day. Seasons passed, and the young queen's fame spread far and wide. Tales of her golden hair, her patience in suffering, and her gentle rule reached distant kingdoms. Travelers spoke of her beauty and kindness, and poets sang songs in her praise. But the queen herself remained humble. She remembered how she had once been scorned and forced to herd geese, and so she never despised the lowly or the poor. She often said, "A crown does not make one noble. It is the heart that reveals a queen." Conrad, the goose boy, continued to serve faithfully in the castle. Though once he had been mischievous, he grew wiser under the queen's example. The prince rewarded him with new duties, and he became a trusted servant, proud to have once tended geese with the queen herself. Yet not all was peace. Whispers arose in faraway lands of envious kings and greedy lords who begrudged the prosperity of the kingdom. One such ruler, coveting their fertile fields and rich trade, began to plot war. His messengers returned with tales of the young queen's gentleness, and he mocked her, saying, "What strength can lie in a kingdom ruled by a goose girl?" When word of these threats reached the castle, the prince grew troubled. "We must prepare for battle," he said gravely. "Our enemies see our peace as weakness, but I will not allow them to harm our people." The queen, however, counseled patience. "Strength is not only in the sword," she said. "Let us send gifts and words of peace first. If they refuse, then we shall defend ourselves with courage, but let us not rush to shed blood." Her wisdom prevailed, and envoys were sent bearing gifts of gold, grain, and honey. To the surprise of many, the hostile king softened when he heard the queen's message. "If such a woman rules there, perhaps they are not weak, but wise," he said. For the first time the land was spared the ravages of war through gentleness, rather than force. The prince marveled at his wife's wisdom and said, "You have saved our people with words where my sword would have failed. Truly, you are more than a queen. You are a blessing to us all." Thus the queen's fame grew even greater. Her people trusted her, her husband cherished her, and her parents across the sea rejoiced in her happiness. But still, she never forgot the lessons of her youth. Each spring she walked again to the meadow where she once combed her golden hair as a goose girl. There she would sit among the wildflowers, remembering the days of sorrow and giving thanks for the joy that followed. Years passed, and the queen bore children, bright and fair, with hair that glistened like gold in the sunlight. The people rejoiced, for they saw hope for the future of the kingdom. The prince, now a king himself after his father's passing, ruled beside his beloved wife, and together they were a pair unmatched in love and wisdom. The queen taught her children gentleness, honesty, and patience. "Never scorn the lowly," she would say, "for once I herded geese, though I was a princess. And never forget that truth will always rise, no matter how deeply it is hidden. The story of her youth became a lesson told to children across the land. Mothers whispered it to their little ones at night, and fathers told it by the fire. And so, the tale of the Goose Girl was not forgotten. But the queen herself still felt a shadow in her heart, the memory of betrayal by one she had trusted. One evening, as she watched her children play in the garden, she spoke softly to the king. "It troubles me still that one who served me so closely turned against me. How can one guard against such deceit?" The king replied, "We cannot see into every heart, but we can live with honesty ourselves, and by our example, teach others to do the same. Treachery will always exist in the world, but truth and goodness endure longer than lies." His words comforted her, and she resolved never to let bitterness take root in her heart. One summer, her parents journeyed from their distant land to visit. At last, the queen was reunited with her mother and father. There was great joy in the castle, and the halls rang with music and laughter. The old queen, embracing her daughter, said, "You have grown stronger than I ever dreamed. You were once a child clinging to my hand, but now you are a woman who has endured sorrow and brought forth peace. I am proud beyond measure." Tears filled the young queen's eyes. "It was your handkerchief that first gave me courage," she said. "Though I lost it, the memory of your love never left me." The family remained together through the summer, sharing stories and strengthening bonds. The people rejoiced to see their rulers surrounded by such love, for they knew that when a kingdom is built on love, it cannot easily fall. Thus, the queen's life, once overshadowed by sorrow, became bright with blessings. In the twilight of her days, the queen often sat in the garden beneath the tree where Falada rested. Her children and grandchildren played nearby, their laughter echoing like bells in the summer air. She would tell them stories of her youth, and always she ended with these words, "Remember, my dear ones, that truth is stronger than lies, and gentleness is greater than pride." Her life became a beacon for all who knew her. When she walked through the villages, the people rose to greet her, not out of fear, but out of love. For they saw in her the heart of a true queen, one who had suffered, endured, and forgiven. In time, songs were made of her tale. Bards sang of the Goose Girl who became a queen, of the faithful horse Falada, and of the cruel maid who met her just reward. These songs spread beyond the kingdom, carried by travelers to distant lands, until the story was known far and wide. And so it was that the queen's name lived on, long after her hair had turned to silver. When at last she passed from this world, the people mourned deeply but with gratitude, for they had been blessed by her reign. She was laid to rest beside her beloved king, beneath the flowering trees of the royal garden, where birds sang as though to honor her memory. The monument to Falada still stood, crowned with blossoms, and children came to lay garlands there, remembering the story of loyalty and truth. Thus ended the tale of the Goose Girl, a tale of sorrow turned to joy, of treachery overcome by truth, of patience crowned with honor. It teaches us that no matter how deeply hidden, truth will shine like gold, and that gentleness, though despised by the proud, is the greatest strength of all. And so, dear listener, may you carry this tale in your heart, and remember always that loyalty, kindness, and truth are treasures greater than any crown. The end.